Armand here with your forecast for the week of June 10th, 2024. We're going to keep it no frills. Why? Because Saturn is big this week, early part of the week. And let me just, while I have a moment over here, let me point out that I often give you days when things are exact, but really all of the things we talk about, the influence kind of builds for a couple of days, it peaks, and then it sort of trails off for a couple of days, depends upon the aspect and so on. But it's not really like it's this day or this hour or something like that. Sometimes like full moon maybe, or something like an eclipse, a station perhaps, but generally speaking, we're talking about, influences that build and then wane again. Why do I mention this? You say, well, we begin the week on the 10th, right? This is Monday, coming off of the sun's square to Saturn. This very much colors the weekend of the 8th and 9th, a time when the moon in Cancer has a kind of stay-at-home feel, a little protective, not as much as it used to be when the moon in Cancer was opposing Pluto. Again, later this year, but for the last 15 years, it's been the case. Not quite so much, but a little bit more of that stay-at-home feel. The moon is just waxing in Cancer, coming out of last Thursday, the 6th, new moon. So yeah, there's not like a tremendous amount of energy. And then we have this Sun-Saturn square. Usually, Sun-Saturn squares, we can always say, a bit of an ego deflator. The sun, the vitality, the principle of energy, and Saturn, limitations, and even the sun gets a little momentary with Saturn, as we all do. I was that the sun blazing with its own glory and so on. And then it's reflected back. That light of the sun is reflected back from Saturn, the farthest easily visible planet in our solar system, and it comes back as this kind of dull grayish yellow light. And it's sort of like the sun is looking at Saturn. Oh, is that the way I look? For a moment, just for a little while this aspect is in effect. So it's usually a little bit of an ego deflator, often at the hands of authority figures. Poor time to ask for favors from authority figures. You want to sort of mind your P's and Q's and all that sort of stuff. Okay, that's the usual thing. But now we had this aspect in the dual sign of Gemini, two twins, and Saturn in the dual sign of Pisces, two fish. And so what I'm thinking, and these are mutable signs, and I'm thinking that the feel of this as we begin the week, particularly on Monday, if you're watching this on the weekend before, in the 8th and the 9th, you're feeling this, but it bleeds over into Monday. A little bit of this indecision kind of thing. We have a lot of possibilities, and you got to choose between them. The possibilities are many. The decision is sort of elusive. Indecision might be the pitfall for many of us this weekend, and then coming into the beginning of the week, right around the 10th and so on. It can be hard to make a decision. Are you going to go do a couple of different festivals this weekend on the one hand, maybe it's a concert you want to see, maybe there's a party you can go to, and maybe you don't make the decisions, and the Cancer moon says, well, and then you stay home and you watch Svengoolie or something like that on Saturday night, and maybe then you start to feel, well, was that a good decision? Anyway, the Monday, the Leo moon will maybe help a little bit with decisions, but another thing that's going to help with decisions in the early part of the week is that Mars, newly in Taurus, right? We're very sensual placement for Mars, poised to take advantage of that. Very sensual placement for Mars. Very earthy, action-oriented placement is square to Pluto. On the collective level, we could see this playing out in a few different ways. This is, Pluto in Aquarius, power to the people, and Mars is ready to go off and act, and they kind of get along. It could be focused action. But for most of us, what I think we're looking at here is there's a kind of volatility to this. If the Sun and Saturn were unable to make up their minds, Mars and Pluto are able to make up their minds. In fact, they're in fixed signs where we might really see them holding on to their ideas and ideals and so on. So this is more of a tension kind of aspect that will color, I would say, Monday, Tuesday, and into Wednesday. Now, here we are. This week, by the way, this is the second half of the Gemini energy that is so prominent in June, right? There's two Junes. There's the Gemini Mercurial June, and then there's the Neptunian June. Well, we're still in that Mercurial play with the possibilities kind of time. Not entirely lacking in practicality. As we get to let's say Tuesday, Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, really, we have. I want to see, this is what Mercury square Saturn does. It makes you qualify. I'm qualified. Is it really? Should I say Monday, or should I just say Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Midweek, Mercury square Saturn. Again, not a great time to ask for favors. Got to be very precise with your communication. And yet Mercury is in Gemini, Saturn is in Pisces. Are we really going to be all that precise about our communication, or are we just going to tell different stories and try to choose among them? It's a little bit of both, I suppose. I could certainly see that there's a lot of hopefully a lot of that Mars Pluto energy can be channeled into verbal sorts of into the verbal domain. And but Mars square Saturn is Mercury square Saturn, rather, very much a time of being a little careful with driving, careful with your communication with others, particularly if you're speaking to somebody as a supervisor at work or a teacher at school or something like that. Words could sound a little bit hard, and bottom line, although there's probably a way out someplace. You know what I mean? It's like, because of the signs involved, we can get a really hard decision and find out, well, but are we going to enforce it? That's always the question. We're coming up to, and I will gaze my eyes over there, on the 14th, which is Friday. The Sun meets Mercury, and that conjunction sort of heralds the peak and the end of the Gemini mercurial energy that we're going to be feeling. And then we start to move towards, as we get into the weekend, the 15th and the 16th, we start to get the earliest sense of the more Neptunian side of June. It's not like things change, a little bit more of this, and then there's a little bit more of that. But anyway, Venus will square Neptune. Now, Venus is in Gemini at the very, very end of Gemini, and where she wants to be light and, keep things, it's about a little, cocktail hour. It's, little parties and gatherings and things like that, chatty, maybe flirty or something, and Neptune just sort of putting everything in soft focus. And it's Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces, and so cocktail party is probably about right. It is this sort of soft focus for anything having to do with relationship, romance, socializing, and it just puts it all in a kind of nice soft focus. It's just, oh, this just feels good. And then, the next thing that happens is that Venus is going to, in the earliest hours of the 17th, it's next week technically, but in the earliest hours of the 17th, she's going to, still the 16th if you're like on the west coast of the US. This is what Mercury does to you. It says, in the earliest hours of the 17th, Venus goes into the sign of Cancer, and we'll talk about that next week, but it gives a different vibe. It's a little bit more traditional. It's more the June wedding type of feel that goes on there. Still coming off of that weekend of Neptunian indulgence or Neptunian soft focus for things. So, beginning of the week, we have a little bit more tension, a little bit more, it'll be a little bit more difficult to get things on track. Mars, Pluto is saying, let's act. The Sun, Mercury, and Saturn are saying, okay, but to do what? If you can choose something and do it, that Mars-Pluto energy is great. If you can't choose anything to do, that Mars-Pluto energy might be a little bit much for you. And so, if you can't direct your energy someplace, to a good cause, Pluto in Aquarius would love that, or to your own sexual indulgences. Mars and Taurus would love that. Anyway, if none of those things are happening for you, then, some sensible exercise, don't overdo it. Just you gotta kind of get the tension out in some way or another. There is going to be a little bit of extra energy. So, that's things to think about for the early part of the week. And then every latter part of the week and into the weekend, on many practical terms, there's really nothing to worry about or anything like that. And then the weekend, now we've got a waxing moon. It would be in Libra. It should be pretty good. So it should be kind of a nice weekend for you, looking towards the weekend of the 15th and 16th. And then comes the 17th. But, talk about that next week. Plenty of time to talk about that.